Hey Smutsters, it's Morgs, and today I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing one of our favorite bat boys of, of the Night Court, Jon Vertullo, who plays Cassian in ACOTAR. So thanks for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Where are you currently located?
So I am in Atlanta, Georgia, and we
Okay.
currently, I don't know if you can hear them, but we currently have thunderstorms and pretty severe ones. So if you hear a random
Oh,
boom, it's because we're in the middle of a thunderstorm right now.
okay. Well, it's actually kind of good for the aesthetic,
Yeah, for
the
sure, for
bat
sure.
boy
Like,
aesthetic.
I actually, there was a commercial session I did a while ago that was also during a thunderstorm, and I finished the tagline right when the thunder, like,
Oh,
bolt, I guess, hit and it shook the booth. And I had the directors like freaking out, like, "Oh my God, that was awesome! We got to figure out how to keep that in."
yeah.
So it happens.
The Thunder was an unpaid actor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know how you credit that or like make sure they get residuals or any of that, but yeah, they definitely helped.
Very cool. So I just wanted to say that you have been like the most requested interview on
Really?
Instagram. Yes,
Oh,
everyone was like, "When are you getting the Cassian actor on here?" And I was like, "I'll send an email."
I am very flattered, especially because
Yeah.
and we were talking about this before you started recording, but I'm not really on social media, so that's even more flattering that I'm not maintaining, any connections on social media, and I guess they're requesting. So you gave the people what they wanted.
Yeah, well, I guess your work speaks for itself. But, I was talking to John before this, and he said maybe one day he'll consider social media. So, should he, we will make sure to send him all of our followers. Okay, so to start, do you feel like you relate to Cassian in real life?
No, not
Oh,
even a
okay.
little bit. What? I take that back. It's not that I don't relate to him, and I think to like the core of good acting is finding how you can draw parallels. You know, the whole thing is bringing humanity to characters that are fictitious, right?
Right.
So there are absolutely things that Cassian does or behaviors that I see parallels in my own life, and that's what I draw on.
Hmm.
Um, but it was funny because when I first got the audition, I kind of laughed. I was talking with my host, like, "This is not me. Like, this is. I mean, okay, I'll audition, like, sure, but this will be a fun little exercise. It's not
Hmm.
like there's someone that's way more in line with this naturally without having to push." And then I booked it, so I was like, "Okay, all right, I guess here we are."
Yeah, so you're
That's
like,
the
so I'm actually a really great actor.
yeah, yeah. Guess I'm better than I thought. All right, cool. That
Yeah,
wasn't a character I put down on my character bingo sheet here, but yeah.
adding
So
it to the list.
yeah, not wasn't someone that I looked to off the bat and was like, yeah, that's my guy.
Hmm.
And obviously, as I've worked on a number of the books and everything, it's I see more parallels as time goes on. But yeah, initially I was like this like badass general, like huge dude that's just doesn't care about red tape, cuts right through. Like, oh no, I'm such a like rule follower nerd. Like that's not me. So like, oh, he loves going to the gym. I hate going to the gym. Like, oh, okay, well here we go.
Well, still cool. I mean, I think it's nice if people are really similar to their characters.
Yeah,
Like Melody was saying, she's very similar to Farah. So I think it's cool if you're similar, and I think it's cool if you're very polar. It's cool for different reasons. So,
for sure.
for Cassian, what is your favorite quality of him?
I think honestly, it is his ability to cut through red tape, and he has this like this natural tendency to see through the politics and the nuance and just cut right to the heart of what the actual problem is.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's really valuable, especially when everyone's playing politic. You need someone that just is waiting for someone to be done so
Yeah.
that they can actually call out the issue. And he's hyper loyal.
Yeah.
And he's loyal without blind loyalty. He will call his friends out when they make mistakes. And I think that balance of cutting through red tape, loyalty without blind loyalty, that
Hmm.
makes for a very, very important friend that I think everyone should have someone like Cassian in their life.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think too, as I continue to read through the books, I'm like, I think this character is the most morally sound character. Like, Reese and Azrael are always kind of doing things that are kind of shady, but I feel like every time Cassian makes a decision, it is so thought out and it is like taking everyone into account. So as I've continued to read, I'm like, I think, yeah, this guy is like so strong. So I would
He's a
follow him to
deeply
battle.
empathetic character. He has a good sense of emotional maturity and empathy, and I think he starts off as the trope of like the big strong brute, but
Hmm.
then once you start peeling away layers, you realize like, oh no, he gets way more than he lets on.
Yeah.
Even if he's not necessarily aware of how well he gets it, he does. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I definitely agree. One of my favorite Cassian parts is when he talks about how he's walked by death his whole life so he could
Mm.
be with Nesta and relate to her. I was like, that's such a powerful like concept, but I think too because he's been around so much trauma that does kind of make him like more morally sound and more like, uninterested in the politics and more interested in like how it's going to actually affect people. So kind of grounds him maybe a little bit.
Yeah, and there's another character I play in a different graphic audio project, that he has this really interesting line, and it's something to the effect of the living have infinitely more in common with the dead. Or sorry, the
Mm-hmm.
living have infinitely more in common than with the dead.
Mm-hmm.
So he's trying to get these two warring cultures to basically put down arms. And
Yeah.
I think Cassian understands that concept, that he'll only fight if he needs to. He will and he'll win,
Yeah.
but he truly tries to treat it as a last resort. And he's not conflict avoidant, but he tries to manage a conflict without it escalating as best as he is capable of.
Yeah. Which makes a lot of sense because he's the one that's going to have to go into battle. So it's less talk and more like, if I say something, this will be like completely followed by action. So
Yeah.
I'm not
I'm
worried
the one going
stuck.
on the front lines, so
Yes.
if I say I'm going to do it, I will.
Yeah. This is a Cassian fan club, obviously. We're all
Yeah.
very into his character. Okay, so going slightly away from Cassian, just to you in general,
Mhm.
did you always know you wanted to do voice acting, or was there like a
Ooh,
defining moment where you wanted to start?
good question. So I'll say no, I didn't. I didn't even really know that I wanted to be acting as a career.
Hmm.
So I did children's theater growing up,
Okay.
and that was like kind of my main. I had a lot of different hobbies, but that was sort of the one that stuck through formative years. Um, and I never really knew what I wanted to do for a job, and so figuring out where to go to school was a little bit of a challenge. And I auditioned. I grew up in Massachusetts, and
Okay.
auditioned at Emerson, which is a big performing arts school up there. And I remember auditioning and seeing all these kids that were like they would have like shanked me if it meant they could get in. And it's like,
Oh,
okay, so if that's what having a job as an actor looks like, if it's that level of desperation, I think I'm good. Like they want it way more. I
yeah.
let me find something else. So I went into film and television production, figuring like, well, it's kind of like entertainment adjacent, and it's interesting, and so that's actually what my background and training is in.
Okay.
Um, and then I did that. I worked at a rental house for about 8 years, uh, and I my wife encouraged me to do like a local show as like a fun date night thing, and the show was a train wreck. It was a
Oh,
play. It was a total train wreck,
yeah.
but the doing the worst show was still better than my best day at my rental house job. Like, all right, there might be something to it.
Yeah.
And through her working on set, she had met the owners of Atlanta Voiceover Studio, or one of the owners, Heidi Rue. And Heidi had said, like, well, if he's getting into acting, he should try voiceover if he's never tried it before. So went to the studio, fell in love with it, just truly like nose grindstone, did pretty much all the classes they offered, got my demo, and just kind of never looked back. So here we are.
Yeah, that's a great story. I love what you said though about how like your best day somewhere else doesn't compare to, your worst day doing something you're passionate about. And I think that as you get older, that's really something that you focus on and should like what is going to fulfill me, So
Yeah. And
I
I
love
think
that.
it was helpful too, having lived a life outside of like performing world, because now I have life experiences I can draw on for characters that are
Yeah.
grounded in reality. It's not just a fiction. I can be like, oh yeah, I worked in a semi-corporate environment that I understand this interaction, or like, oh, I had like work days where I was running late through no fault of my own, but I still caught heat for it, or whatever. Um, like that's all real. It's not a fiction. So I have grounded experiences that I can draw on that I can access really, really quickly, which is helpful. As opposed to someone that only ever has a performing background, they have to manufacture a lot more and use up a lot more like creative juice to get to that point
Yeah.
when they don't have something lived to draw on.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. That's so cool. Okay, so for everyone's, favorite series, ACOTAR, how did the ACOTAR audition come about, and had you heard about the series beforehand?
Sure. So the audition came from. So I was on and am on the graphic audio roster.
Okay.
So it's a group of actors that I didn't know this at the time, but typically uh, they're what's called direct offer. So the director basically has carte blanche and can cast whoever they want whenever they want for various
Mhm.
projects. You kind of have a standing audition that's this really long thing that they cut up, and you have like all the accents you can do and a bunch of different dramatic scenes, some comedy, some action. So they have these snippets that they can sample and be like, yeah, I like John for this or Anthony for that. Um, I didn't know it at the time, but that's how they usually cast.
Okay.
So ACOTAR was, I think, only my second project.
Oh,
So when I got
wow.
an yeah, so when I got an email from the director, Colleen, saying, "Hey, we want to audition you for this. When are you available? We want to have it be a directed audition." I was like, "Oh, okay." I audition every day. This is totally not out of the norm.
Yeah.
So yeah, we scheduled the time. She gave me the scenes, and we just worked through it like we normally would. I recorded on my end and then sent it in. Um, I'd never heard of it, and when
Hmm.
she sent me the audition, I was like, "Wow, this book has a wiki page. Oh, my
Yeah.
character has a wiki page. Oh God, like I am." And this is kind of where I was like, I have nothing in common with this guy. Like this is going to be a deep pull. And I was talking about lived experiences. Like, okay, I'm going to have to do a little more manufacturing, like creative work to
Right.
find parallels. Um, and so I was just basically reading it and laughing because in my mind, like a perfect fan cast would be Jason Momoa. It's
Okay,
like,
yeah, I've heard that
dude,
a
if you
lot.
got a young Jason Momoa, that's like in my mind, that's Cassian.
Mhm.
Like, okay, that's let's
Yeah.
find like that energy at least. It's probably
Mhm.
not me, and so I tried to kind of combine uh, Jason Momoa with Jensen Ackles as
Okay.
like, all right, this is sort of where probably I'll try to find a middle ground, and that's kind of where I ended up. Um, but yeah, we did the audition, and then I got an email. It was a week or two after from Colleen, who said like, "All right, cool, you got it. Let's do it." I'm
Oh,
like, "Oh, okay,"
wow.
but I'd not had really any experience outside of like, well, there's a wiki page, so that's cool. Um, and then we
Was
did
the
it.
wiki page super helpful? Like, did you learn a lot from it, or was
Yeah,
it newer
well,
at that point?
it was really helpful, even just as like a really quick primer. Like I only have a couple of days to work through it, so let me get some high points. I'm like, oh, okay. So there's this thing with his mom, and this is kind of his place in the friend group, and
Mhm.
he's essentially like so powerful that he has to get these siphons that bleed off the energy. Okay, okay, all right. So he's used to being powerful, or is he? Like finding the moments of balance where I can open up some of the vulnerability, um, especially because he's putting on this armor effectively all the time, emotional armor.
Yeah.
Um, and the scene I was given was, I'm trying to remember which book it was in. It was essentially Cassian flying with Feyre and talking about Nesta
Okay.
and how he realized there was a mating bond. He
Mm,
wasn't using that word or that phrase, but he knew something was up. And Feyre starts to walk away, and he has this moment of just like pure emotional vulnerability where he's like half talking to himself. And I think in my mind, that's the piece that clinched it was coming in with the bravado and then making that little shift to like a flash of vulnerability, and then
yeah.
the armor goes back. Um, so if I were to take a guess, I would say that was probably the moment that Colleen, the director, was like, all right, this guy gets it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I can't speak. I know Sarah J. Maas was the person that had final say, so something in that she liked. Uh, but if I were to take a guess, it would probably be that moment.
Yeah, and I feel like all of her characters are very complex, so, like, you really
Mm.
have to understand, like, how to transition slightly, and I've said this before in other interviews, but I feel like what's so interesting about being a voice actor is you have to convince people just with, like, your tone and inflection, about what you're saying, like, you have no visual cues, you have no, you know, like, slight movements, like, nothing anyone can see, so it's almost like you guys are working twice as hard,
Yeah.
to do it. So I'm always very impressed by that.
Yeah, and I think for me in projects in general, that's always one of the things that the first question I try to answer. This is actually from Dave Fennoy. He's a very famous voice actor. But when he's approaching a project, he feels the most important thing to answer first is where are you physically? Are you, out in a forest? Are you flying through the sky as Cassian was? Are you just in a really intimate, warm, cozy room? Because how you communicate changes based on the space you're in. So if you
Yeah,
start from there, and then I always feel like the next best question is how far away from the person you're talking to are you?
right.
Because like how much projection is there? Is it a really intimate conversation, or is it, you know, you're walking around the room and you're playing off of bending over and picking something up? But again, to your point, you don't have visuals to go off of. So how can I sell that I just bent over to pick something up and maintain a conversation while I'm like almost distracted,
Yeah.
but like I'm not just reading words on a page. It's no, no, no. I'm moving around the space. There are things going on other than just this conversation. And the more you can sell the idea of that distraction of it being a lived-in world, the more effective the scene typically is.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. When I was interviewing Anthony, who plays Reese, for anyone who doesn't know, he said that he had his hand up during the interview because he was trying to talk to
Mm.
like a fake Farah, and he
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
so I would,
Close and for
yeah,
yeah,
so I would know how to level my voice. So you guys have all kind of said the same thing. So I think that is what makes you such good voice actors is that you're constantly thinking about like 30 or 40 things just for like a sentence. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's
It's
very cool.
and then like okay, I have 7 words. How do I use those 7 words to do all of that in like this teeny
Yeah.
tiny space?
Very cool. Okay, so for the ACOTAR audition, was it any different because it was such a big role? Like, did she imply that it was really important or certain lines, or was it just like every other audition?
Yeah. Well, again, now I know that auditions in general for graphic audio are like already an indicator that it's a bigger project.
Okay,
Because typically it's just, hey, here's this book, you're cast. When are you available?
right.
So just the simple fact that you get an audition is like, oh, okay, this is probably a big one. Let me do a little digging here.
Yeah,
Um, but again, I had no context for that at the time. I'm trying to remember. I don't know. I think typically, so at the very beginning, Colleen and I, the director, um, we just kind of discussed the character. She checked in to kind of see what my initial thoughts were. Um, and I think it was actually the recording of the very first session where she kind of braced me. She's like, yeah, so I don't know, maybe buckle up
yeah,
because people might be reaching out.
hmm
Just heads up, it's kind of like a big deal. I don't know if
yeah,
you like got that on. I was like, not really. I mean, I saw the fan art. That was kind of cool.
hmm
And then slowly over time, I was like, oh, this is like really big.
yeah.
Got it. Oh, wow. Okay.
I've heard
So
so many
yeah,
good things about Colleen, in terms of like
yeah,
getting you guys set up for these interviews or auditions where she is just like hinting at certain things to like not have you lose your cool or anything.
yeah,
So she sounds
yeah.
super great.
She's really good about like no pressure, low stakes. Just do what you did in the audition. Here's what I really liked. Um, and then again, and I think Anthony talked about this too. if there was if there were any lines that she knew like this one's important, it was just like, oh, let's take it again, maybe land on that a little more. This is like we're trying to drive this point home, but it was never so the fans are going to eviscerate you if you don't
Yeah.
say this right, so
Right.
let's make sure. There was never any of that pressure. It was always just like, oh, let's just give that one another try. Just, I don't
Yeah.
know,
Which is
like
so helpful because it's like you don't need the pressure. And like, I feel like pressure and stress can be really reflected in the voice. And
Mm.
like, whenever people get anxious, tones change and things like that. So I could see how like she really needs you guys not to change up like at all. So that's
Well,
very
and it's interesting you talk about kind of anxiety and pressure influencing the voice, and because that's one of the things that a lot of my coaches have told people before they make the transition to full-time acting is casting directors can hear when you're desperate for work. It
mm,
changes your performance.
yeah.
So you know the advice is usually like maintain that second job as long as you can, because if you know where your money's coming from and you're stable, then that lack of pressure will come through as confidence in your auditions.
Oh, very
Whereas
cool.
if you're in that like, it's getting a little tight, I really need to book this thing,
Yeah.
then that comes across in the audition, and the casting directors hear desperation and they kind of know it's like, I don't know what it was. It just, he didn't feel settled or he didn't feel confident. There's something missing. And
Yeah.
it's that pressure. And so you kind of touch on a good point. And Colleen does a great job of shielding us from that pressure of, whether it's the weight of expectations for fans or the pressure of just needing to work. She really does a good job of shielding her talent. So thank you, Colleen.
Yeah, yeah. Points for that. Okay, so speaking of the fans, have you received any fan mail about Cassian?
Yes, I have,
Okay.
and I am so grateful. Everyone that's reached out has been so wonderful and kind, and it was kind of funny. I actually had there were he was like two people right at the same time reached out, and I I hope I don't embarrass them by using the subject line, but it was hilarious because both of the subject lines that they sent were identical, like character
Oh,
identical. So every single piece of it was. I honestly initially thought it was just spam through my
yeah.
website, because it was so perfect. But they both had this may be an odd request, but,
Oh,
and it
it's so
was the same
fun.
subject.
Hmm.
Um, and I was like, okay. And I click on it to look at it. It was like, nope, they're just huge fans. They were so sweet, and they asked me to record messages. One person wanted me to record a message for his wife, and one person wanted me to record a message initially for her girlfriend, and then for her whole group of friends. But yeah, everyone's been amazing to interact with, and I'm very, very grateful that it's been very positive and interactions have
Yeah,
all been good. So thank
right.
you.
So you do have a cameo, correct?
I don't.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
this was
don't.
just
Okay.
through my website.
Okay.
No, I haven't set. I probably should. But no, I haven't set one up. It was just through my website, which is
Oh,
why it was
cool.
even crazier that the subject line is literally
Yeah.
they independently came to the same subject header, which I thought was amazing. And at the time, I was like, uh-oh, that looks a little spam-like. But no,
Right.
it was just people that had the same kind of fear of they didn't want to intrude too much. They didn't want to make any strange requests. It was like, nope, all good. Happy to help.
Yeah. Well, if you do make a cameo, send it my way and I will send it
Yes.
to everyone on
I
on
will be
my
sure to.
end. I'm sure they will love that. But I have heard that like the ACOTAR fans and other kind of like Sarah J. Maas fans, whether it's like Throne of Glass or Crescent City, everyone's usually pretty respectful. I know on my end when I was making the smut Instagram and TikTok and everything, I was just like, I'm not sure how this is gonna go over, because you just never know like how unhinged, I guess, people will be with certain
Yeah,
comments and stuff.
the
Uh,
internet can be a big scary place. So I'm grateful, and it sounds like you are too. That like no, we've been getting by pretty good so far.
yeah, it honestly seems like everyone is just like super normal and just like
Yeah,
trying to have a nice like hobby and a fun time. So, yeah, I appreciate them and same thing. Everyone's been cool thus far.
yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yes, yes. Okay. So, let me see where I'm at in this. Um, have you met any of the other voice actors from the series?
Ooh. So from the series, I think you mentioned Anthony,
Mhm.
and he and I interact occasionally on LinkedIn,
Okay.
which is like the only social media I use. But yeah, we periodically just kind of check in. I think we've also done a couple of projects together too, which is cool,
Oh,
just step outside of the ACOTAR world. So we did Quarter Mage, Hour Mage, and that whole series.
yeah, I think
So that's
Gabriel
been
was
great.
talking about Quarter Mage. So Quarter Mage
Yep.
is
So
one where
Gabriel.
you guys have all been on it. I think
Hmm.
Melody as well, right?
Yep.
Or okay.
Yeah, it
So
was like a semi reunion actually.
and it just came out, right? I think I saw something
Yeah,
that Melody posted
or is it
or
about to?
something
I
like
can't
that,
remember.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
if it's not out already, it will be out shortly.
Okay. So
And then
I'll
we're working on the whole series in theory.
yeah.
So yeah, that should be out now. If it's not, it will be out soon.
Okay, I'll keep tabs on that so I can send everyone that because I think they would all love it. And I've heard such good things from Gabriel about it, so I'm excited myself to listen.
Yes. Yeah, it was a really fun project, and it was similar uh to graphic audio in the approach in that it's a full cast, and
Mhm.
so that's always I always prefer that as a medium, because I don't know. I respect people that like solo narrations, but
Mhm.
I always like it when I actually get to have a scene that interacts with someone. But
Yeah.
that's my personal preference.
No, I definitely agree. It adds so much. And obviously that kind of shows with all of the ACOTAR graphic audios how big they've become. People are really like, we like this more than just one voice, trying to compensate for for all of these characters.
Yeah,
Um,
it's and there's a lot. There are quite a few characters.
yeah, so definitely excited about listening to the Quarter Mage and all of the other projects. Okay, so going back, what were your recording days like for
Ooh.
ACOTAR?
So the recording days were pretty similar to other projects. Basically, you just schedule time. You work with there's a kind of a studio admin, and he coordinates all the times for all the actors to go in. And we actually record via Discord, so we're all
Okay.
on a shared Discord breakout room.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and so it's you and the director,
Okay.
and you go through and you just block out time. You just sit down, and it's nice to have the director in those sessions because Colleen would read basically she'd read me into a scene. So I would get kind of a cue, and not only just a verbal cue, but also an emotional cue for she's kind of seeing the big picture.
Hmm.
So if something's not apparent, or say someone already recorded a scene and they're responding a very specific way,
Yeah.
I can play off of that because either she knows and is kind of parroting that, or she can verbally tell me like, "Hey, so I know it says this, but they kind of read it like that. So
Mm,
respond. It's going to be a little more in this tone, or maybe this should be more defensive, or actually you need to start being more aggressive because they start to kind of audibly back off."
yeah.
So it's really helpful to have a director like Colleen that's also an actor who can play kind of the nuance of a scene for you to read off of. So that's usually you just block out the time, you go through, and then that's it. You kind of hit the end point, and I'm just recording locally on my system here, and then I
Yeah.
send the files, and they
Oh,
mash
cool.
it all together.
How long does it take to record a book?
That's a really good question.
It just kind of depends.
Um, yeah. It depends. I mean, on the length. So how big is the book would be the
Yeah.
first question. But also, how many characters are there? Because for them, they have to record individual sessions for every actor that
Right.
pairs with the director. Um, Typically, if I recall correctly, they will have separate sessions where if it's like a third person narration, the narrator is kind of going off on their own and recording, and just since that's such a big chunk,
Yeah.
um, but all of the characters get one-on-one sessions. So if there's a lot of characters, that's a lot of time that needs to be scheduled. So that can kind of push back a deadline, or make it take longer. Um, but for individual sessions, I want to say like you try to get around 100 lines an hour. I
Okay.
want to say that was like the target. And then, sometimes you go faster depending on if they're like little one-liners, or if you have these big monologues, it might take a little longer because there's more nuance and there's just longer chunks to work through.
Yeah.
So it depends on the character and it depends on the length of the book. But yeah, and I think every timeline too is different because sometimes they have release deadlines that they have to hit. So you get this tight window. Usually, when you're cast, it's like a 2 week window of recording. Like, hey,
Okay.
give us your dates between now and this date.
Yeah.
So as long as they hit that deadline, they know they can make it work.
Okay. Side question that wasn't in the pre-interview questions. Do you guys have like water and snacks and like how do you keep your voice
Ah,
up
yes.
during that?
So definitely water.
Okay.
We usually, or I usually keep water available. And then the other thing too, if it's a in general, you also it's a good idea to have tea. Usually
Oh,
there's
for
something
your
called
throat.
throat coat that
Yeah.
everybody kind of has. It's like a voice actor's best weapon.
Okay.
But really, actually, their best weapon is staying hydrated. So that's why water
Mhm.
comes first.
Yeah.
Um, there are also in between sessions, you obviously can't have this during a session, but in between, especially if it's vocally strenuous, misters like you just the you can get them at CVS. They just kind of kick out a warm mist that's really good
Oh,
for kind of creating an environment to let your throat and vocal cords heal.
yeah.
Um, so after a long day, I'll sometimes just like put something on Netflix and sit down with like my little steamer and just kind
Yeah.
of lean over it, just so that I'm taking in nice warm air,
Okay.
and uh, moisture and keeping everything nice and loose.
Right.
Um, and yeah, that's pretty much, and warm-ups are super important.
Mm.
But I try not to keep food or snacks in the booth just
Okay.
because A, they make noise, and B, if they dry out my mouth, then I get
Oh,
more mouth clicks
like
and
a
like those little,
cracker or something.
yeah, right. Or anything with salt.
Mm.
Just it can make that little clicky sound that engineers then
Oh,
have to go in and try to clean up.
yeah.
Um, that said, for really long sessions, we'll take periodic like restroom breaks and snack breaks, or sometimes other directors have to like let their dogs out,
Right.
or just things happen. So when you're blocking out a couple of hours at a time, inevitably life happens.
Yeah.
So for the most part, I try to have snacks will be like outside of my booth.
Okay.
uh, but yeah, in the booth, definitely water, sometimes tea. Yeah.
Good to know. What kind of snacks do you eat then if it's not salty, like
Well, I mean,
or salads?
during a day, like I'll take lunch breaks and then
Yeah.
I don't really worry too much about it. As long as again, I'll like water, food, and then water again to kind of make sure everything's flushed out. But yeah, if I'm in a session, I don't really want to have anything too salty, or especially like bags or crinkly things like
Yeah.
humor. Um, but yeah, I try to avoid things that'll make it too bad. I have actually heard sometimes if you're mucusy,
Hmm.
which is like super gross to talk about. But if you're mucusy, some people have said that Coke or other sodas can help break up mucus. So like as a
Oh,
quick
interesting.
get out of jail free card, you can
Yeah.
have like a little Coke and just take a swig, and it will help clear out some of that stuff that's like stuck in the back of the throat.
Right.
I know people swear by green apples if you're particularly clicky.
Oh, okay.
um, the pectin in the green apple is what people theorize helps with some of the
Mm.
mouth click and moisture issues. So yeah, there's lots of like little voiceover
Right.
tricks for various problems.
Yeah.
And I know you become hyper aware, especially with headphones, of like mouth clicks and noises and just bodies making weird sounds. And
Right.
so people go to extreme lengths to try to get rid of it. But yeah, those are kind of the staple tricks of the trade,
Yeah.
for having in or around the booth.
Makes sense. I love doing these interviews because I really think people sometimes don't realize the intricacies that you guys have to think about to create
Yeah.
these characters and like how many things are going through your brain at one time. So,
Well,
um,
and if you get
yeah.
sick, you're out of a job.
Yeah.
Like you have to stay healthy. You have to maintain your vocal health. Get a good ENT doctor that can kind of periodically check you out, make sure you're not getting any vocal nodes. Especially for
Mhm.
people that do video games or high effort
Okay.
interactions where if you're doing it well, you should be protecting your voice, but inevitably, oh, I just pushed that a little too hard. Oh, okay. I
Right.
got to go make sure that I didn't hurt myself, because then you're out of work. So
Yeah.
yeah, you think very differently, or you start to think differently when it's like, oh, this is how I make my money. I kind of have to like protect myself. I know,
Yeah.
one of the coaches I work with at Atlanta Voiceover Studio, he has his voice insured, because if he loses his
Oh.
voice, he loses money. So he literally has his voice insured, which is a great idea.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know you could do that, but
Yeah, singers, a lot of singers do it.
okay.
Like big talent. Because again, like, well, if Adele loses her voice, that's a lot of money that's just sitting on the table. So
Oh,
and same with like the insurance payout, that if she gets sick, the venue then has to reimburse tickets or they figure out some other way.
right.
So for her, that's an insurance liability. For us, that's like, well, I need to pay my mortgage. So
Yeah.
like, thanks,
Yeah.
insurance.
100%. Again, so interesting, and I always like asking these questions just so everyone can kind of get a better understanding of all of the work you guys do and
Yeah.
how impressive it is. So
Well, thank you for asking them.
yeah, I'd always admire everyone's work. So okay, going to the fans.
Yes.
Um, I know you don't have social media, but has anyone like in your family or friends shown you any of the Cassian memes on
N-
social media?
No, not
Okay.
really. Um, my brother-in-law, when he found out that I was Cassian, he bought the books, and I don't think he's
Oh,
read them yet, but
okay.
he had never heard of them. But he bought the books, and he's like, he keeps saying, he's like, I don't know if I like, if I can deal with knowing you and then reading Cassian.
Yeah.
But my sister has had her girlfriends be like, your little brother's Cassian? Oh my God. Like
Yeah.
it totally it ruined
Oh
it because I was always like
no.
I was the little brother in the friend group, and so
Yeah.
it's like I can't think about that. That's so weird. But yeah, no, I've not had friends or family send me any memes. I've independently come across them as people have kind of sent them my way, and most of them, there was one I saw that I think it was a woman sort of joking about how I'd not heard about the series before,
Mhm.
and she did this like role play as me and Colleen. Basically,
Oh.
Colleen describing like, so you know this is a big project, right? I mean, okay. No, you might want to prepare for it. Oh,
Yeah.
all right. And it was like this artificial voice, but it was well done. It was very well done. So that's probably the only one I've seen.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. Everyone really loves
Oh.
Cassian. So just so you know, I think that's why everyone was so interested in having this interview happen. But I mean, it's mostly what you would think, like things about like put your hands on the headboard or the what is it? I will find you in the next world, the next life. Like people really
Hmm.
um like those. Various things. Like there were a few where there was a time period where people were having their boyfriends reenact your lines.
Oh.
And then them like freaking out or things like that. So I was just wondering if you had seen them, but
No. Again, this is sort of the drawdown or the
yeah.
drawback of not really being on social media. I'm missing a whole avenue of entertainment.
Yeah, well, should you ever join, there's a ton
Mm.
of content that you can
Oh
watch.
man,
Yeah.
buckle up.
So have you seen anyone out in the wilds reading ACOTAR?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So this was, I think the first book had just come out, and I was flying, and I was at the airport, and I was sitting, and I was just kind of on my phone scrolling, and then I look up and I see the cover of A Court of Thorns and Roses. Like, oh,
Oh.
okay, cool. Oh, wow. And then I kind of look around, and it's like 5 or 10 people all in the same gate, all reading. I was like, whoa,
Oh.
okay, that's kind of big. And then it was when I got to the state I was in, I just popped into Barnes& Noble, and there's like a whole section.
Oh yeah, they have their
Whoa,
own section. Yes, it's huge.
yep. And it's like,
Yeah.
this is really big.
Hmm.
And I was audio engineering a class at the studio, and sure enough, front row, I saw a guy that actually kind of looked like Cassian, and turns out he cosplays as Cassian with his
Oh.
girlfriend,
Okay.
who cosplays as Nesta.
Yeah.
Um, but he was reading it, and offhandedly I was like, "Oh yeah, I play Cassian," and he lost it. He was
Oh.
so excited.
Yeah.
Um, like I don't know if he thought I was gonna give him like crap for reading it, but he like went from really like semi embarrassed to like lighting up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool. But yes, to answer the question, I have seen people out in the wild reading it, and it is always cool in bookstores to kind of walk around and just kind of poke around that section and be like, oh, yep, there it is. There's that little Sarah J. Maas section. Okay, very cool.
That's
So
so funny that you said that because Anthony said he did the same thing that he went to that he went to
yeah, I
Barnes and
mean, you gotta
Noble.
do a little bit of the ego
Yeah.
stroke, like the tiniest amount.
Yeah, he said he like stood there and he was just like smiling at people as they were walking by in his
Like,
mind.
hey,
He's
I'm
like,
gonna.
I'm Reese. Yeah, yeah. So that's funny.
Yeah.
Did you end up taking
I mean, I
pictures with
don't.
that guy?
No, he did. He did. He took a picture with with me, and he sent it to his girlfriend. I don't. He is on Instagram, so it may have landed on social media, but
Mhm.
um, again, the cool thing about voiceover is it's such a niche community that like
Mhm.
you know, walking around. Plus, I might sound like the guy, but I don't look like the guy. So I can usually get away before people, like, no one's gonna know. So I
Mhm.
could stand next to the book all day and be like, "Man, it's weird that a guy is standing next to these
Yeah.
books, but okay."
Right.
So I can, it is nice to have those little moments, but it is also nice that they're kind of contained.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So you can have the attention when you would like it and then remove
Yeah.
yourself when you would not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So very cool. Okay, so going on to other things outside of ACOTAR, do you
Mhm.
have any other upcoming projects other than the Quarter Mage or
Yes.
anything that you
So,
finish?
so there's a couple of things that I'm under NDA, so I can't talk
Okay,
about those.
fair.
Um, yeah, I don't, that'd be bad.
Yeah.
But so I narrate outside of graphic audio as well. Thrilling, I do actually a lot of business books.
Oh, okay.
So if someone's interested, I have narrated. I think I probably have like 6 or 7 business books that are coming out.
Oh, cool.
There is actually one that should be released this week, or if not very soon, called Anchor Boy, and that's really cool because that's about he was a local Atlanta newscaster who was a closeted gay man in the '80s.
Oh.
He was like a one of the youngest anchormen in kind of the industry at the time. I think he
Mhm.
was the youngest in his area. Um, but he was a closeted gay man in the '80s when that was, obviously a huge deal. But he's this Emmy award winning news anchor, and he ended up proving someone was guilty of murdering an extra person. He was already in jail, but he ended up helping to prove a third murder.
Ah,
Uh, and then that person basically outed him to the studio,
wow.
and it was just like all this chaos ensues. But it's based on a true. It's this guy's actual life,
Wow.
um, and so it's this fascinating. It's the author's name is Mark Pettit.
Okay.
So that was a really cool project, and I got to work and talk to Mark a lot to make sure that I was honoring his perspective.
Yeah.
So that should be coming out very soon, and they might be looking to turn that into a film at some point. So
Ooh.
that would also be cool.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so between the business books, I also do a lot of commercial voiceover. So
Okay.
I think I currently have two, well, more than two. So there's one campaign for a company called UFOS, the kind of
Okay.
recovery footwear. That's on TV right now. And then I think I just recorded a LASIK spot,
Mm.
and actually, there's an Aflac ad that I did that's
Oh,
on
fun.
Spotify and is it iHeartRadio? No, Spotify and Pandora. Um, so that was really fun to work on. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm kind of everywhere,
Well,
do a little bit of
yes.
everything.
Okay, so for the books, where can we download those to support you?
Yeah, so obviously for the new graphic audio projects coming out, graphic audio would be the best place to go. I find the quality off of graphic audio's site is a little better than Audible.
Okay.
For the other books, Audible would be a safe bet. There's another company called Lantern Audio, which is, I believe, one of the locations that Anchor Boy is coming out.
Okay.
But yeah, so between Audible, Graphic Audio, and Lantern, those would be kind of the three main places to get the books that I work on. Um, and then I guess the commercials would just be floating around on the air.
Fair. Okay, well, I'll be sure to link the Quarter Mage so
Yes.
that everyone can download that so you don't have to look far, just look in the description of this video. Okay, so if you had the chance, because I've always wanted to go to Comic-Con, if you could do a meet and greet with your fellow voice actors, would you be up for that?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
there was I think there was some interest, I forget the name of the convention, but there was some brief interest for, I think it was a fantasy convention, like a
Mm,
fantasy book convention or romance convention.
mm.
They were starting to gather people, and then it kind of fell apart. But yeah, no, I'd happily go to Comic-Con.
Okay, because I've asked Anthony, Melody, and Gabriel, and they've all said
And the
yes.
answer was good.
Yes,
Ha.
yes. So Melody was like, I was telling her that whenever I get a new hobby, I kind of like hyperfixate on it and then like it
Mm.
grows. And that's how, the BookTok and Instagram started. And so she was like, is this going to be your new hyperfixation to get us all at some kind of, convention or
Take
event?
it and run,
Yeah.
please.
And I
Have
was
at it.
like, once I get the yeses from everyone, because Gabriel was saying that he went to I forget what they call it, some kind of ball that they host
Ah, yes.
every year. I think was it in Colorado or something? It's like I don't know,
Uh,
it's like a
I
fairy
think I heard
ball.
about it, but I
Yeah.
didn't attend.
Yeah,
But I
maybe
heard about it.
Star Ball or something like that, but they host it in like February, I think, um, of each year. So he went to it. He dressed as Lucian, which is so cool. And so he was like, "Yeah, I already went. Like, we should totally do it." And I was like, "Okay."
All right. Okay.
So to
Yeah,
be
no, I'd have to
determined.
go.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, please keep us informed.
Yeah. Okay. So final questions. What is your ACOTAR hot take?
Ooh. Okay. This might get some hate mail. I don't know.
Uh-oh.
We'll see. Um, so my hot take is that I am not a huge fan of mating bonds as a
Mm,
concept. I get it. Now hear me out.
yes.
Functionally, I get it.
Mhm.
From a writing perspective, it's a great device to have people in conflict, which is great for storytelling, because you often have one person that wants to, one person that doesn't, and the way you resolve it is by having either a deity, a la ancient Greek gods, or magic, or what have you, to force them together.
Mhm.
I feel like in the modern age, that's just a touch icky, because
Okay.
like no should mean no.
Mhm.
So my initial reaction whenever I hear about a mating bond is to kind of bristle, because consent is sexy. So it feels like just a hair non-consensual because you
Okay.
just often people just have to kind of give into it and relent. Like,
Yeah.
well, this is my lot in life. I guess I have to.
Mhm.
So yeah, I always kind of bristle at the idea of mating bonds. But again, functionally, from a storytelling device purpose, I totally get it, and it's a really handy device to have to force people together. So
Yeah.
I get
I
it,
think
but it
yeah.
always kind of
I think that's a good hot take because, you make a good point. Like Elaine does not want to be with Lucian.
right.
And he just keeps following her around, being like, but we have a mating bond. And so you're making a good point about the consent thing. She's
She
continuously
said
being
no.
like, yeah. And
Okay.
he's still trying to push it. So I do think maybe that will be expanded on, hopefully, in the next book, where you're gonna have to have some kind of like he's gonna have to be cool with it should she choose to move on with someone else. And I think he was kind of getting to that point at the end. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So not a bad hot take. I think that's a good hot take. If anything, it means
Cool.
you've
All
read the
right.
books.
Yeah, right, sure, yes. And it is I find it to be more a genre hot take. It's
Mhm.
less like it's less ACOTAR specific. It's more a genre thing that as a concept, mating bonds always give me a little bit of pause, but and just because I've not seen one that didn't make me feel just a little bit icky doesn't mean one doesn't exist. It
Yes.
could totally be like it could exist somewhere.
Mhm.
So, I'm willing to be counteracted.
Yes. Well, no, I think that's fair. Okay. So for everyone's favorite part, everyone's highly anticipated, the question that I have been asked, I want
Mm.
to say probably 100 times. Uh,
Wow.
yes. No, like literally every video, someone's like, "Can you get Cassian to say this line?" And I was like, "We'll see." So, to precursor this, John was super nice because I was like, "What line do you want to do?" Opened it up because I was like, "I don't know." And he was like, "Why don't I do what everyone wants to hear?" And I was like, "That would be exceptional." So,
I think we will accept this.
yes. So, would you do one of your famous lines for us?
Yes. Would do you want me to do the lead into it? Because there's
Sure.
one other line before that is a part of it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll
All
we'll
right.
take whatever.
Okay. Get on your hands and knees. Put your hands on the headboard.
10 out of 10. Everyone is going to absolutely love that. Yeah, I really appreciate you doing that line for us
Of course.
because
I mean, who am I to deny the fans?
Yeah. I want to say probably, yeah, everyone's favorite line.
I mean, it is, yeah, that's in the handful of times people have reached out for a personalized fan message, that is usually the one like, if you could like, no pressure, but if you could just throw something like that in, really appreciate it. Like, happy to do
Yeah.
it.
I'm so excited. I'll have to email you all of the screenshots of the comments.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
please.
And
Yeah, yeah. I'll be
whatever.
really curious to see it.
Yeah. I'm expecting, a lot of excitement from it. So,
Good.
yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining this interview and taking the time to tell us more about yourself and your character and, yeah, your voiceover journey.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, okay. So, like I said before, I will make sure that I have all of John's information on his upcoming projects. And if you do want to email him and maybe get some kind of cameo-esque project done, I will link that for everyone. So, thanks again, and hopefully we will see you in the next couple of months for a follow-up.
Cool. All right. See you soon.
Bye.